Hello there, welcome back to Whispered History. Tonight we're traveling far beyond the crowded cities and towering castles of medieval Europe. Instead, we'll journey across endless seas of golden grass. We'll follow winding rivers that shimmer beneath the morning sun. We'll listen to the distant rumble of millions of buffalo moving across the Great Plains. And together, we'll discover the remarkable story of one of North America's most influential indigenous nations, the Sioux, for centuries before railroads crossed the American frontier, before forts dotted the plains, and before the famous battles that would later capture the world's attention. The Sioux people had already built a rich and vibrant civilization. Their history was not simply one of war, it was a story of families, of hunters and storytellers, of children growing beside campfires, of spiritual traditions passed from one generation to another, of remarkable leaders, and of a people whose deep connection to the land shaped every part of daily life. Many people first hear the name Sioux through stories about Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, or the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Those events are certainly important, and in time, we'll gently explore each of them. But tonight, we're beginning much earlier, long before soldiers marched across the plains, long before treaties were signed, long before the American frontier reached the heart of Sioux country. We'll start at the beginning. We'll discover where the Sioux came from, how they lived, what they believed, and how they became one of the most respected nations of the Great Plains. As always, there's no need to rush. This isn't a fast-paced documentary. There won't be dramatic music or sudden surprises. Instead, we'll move slowly through history, allowing each chapter to unfold naturally. Perhaps you're already resting comfortably beneath a warm blanket. Maybe the room is quiet except for the gentle sound of rain outside your window. Or perhaps this story will accompany you as you slowly drift toward sleep, wherever you're listening from. I'm very glad you're here. And before we begin tonight's journey, if you enjoy peaceful history documentaries like this one, please take a moment to like this video. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from or what history you'd love to hear next. And subscribe to Whispered History. Your support truly helps this channel continue bringing calm, immersive history stories every week, and it allows many more people to discover these relaxing journeys through the past. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, take a slow, gentle breath, and let's step back hundreds of years into a world unlike anything we know today. Imagine standing on a quiet hill as dawn slowly breaks across the North American continent. The air is cool. A soft breeze ripples through waist-high prairie grass. The horizon seems endless. There are no highways, no cities, no fences stretching across the landscape. Only open country, rolling hills, sparkling rivers, dense forests in the distance, and a sky so wide that it almost seems to touch the earth itself. This was a land alive with movement. Millions of buffalo wandered across the plains. Elk grazed beside quiet streams. Pronghorn antelope darted across open grasslands with astonishing speed. Wolves watched patiently from distant ridges. Eagles circled high above. Every season brought its own rhythm. Spring covered the prairie with wildflowers. Summer warmed the rivers and forests. Autumn painted the leaves with brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Winter wrapped everything beneath blankets of snow. Long before European explorers arrived, the continent was already home to hundreds of thriving indigenous nations. Each possessed its own language, its own traditions, its own stories, its own way of understanding the world. Among these nations, one people would gradually become known across the Great Plains for their courage, their adaptability, and their extraordinary relationship with the land. Today, we often use the word Sioux. It appears in books, maps, museums, and history documentaries. Yet that name carries an interesting story of its own. The people themselves generally did not call themselves Sioux. The word likely originated from neighboring Algonquian-speaking peoples and eventually entered the French language during the 17th century. French fur traders shortened a longer indigenous word into Sioux, and over time it became the name most Europeans used. The people themselves traditionally identified according to their own nations: the Dakota, the Lakota, and the Nakota. Although closely related, each possessed its own regional identity while sharing common ancestry, similar languages, and many cultural traditions. Their language belonged to the Siouan language family, one of North America's oldest linguistic traditions. Even today, many Dakota and Lakota communities continue working to preserve and teach these beautiful languages to younger generations. Language meant far more than communication. It carried songs, prayers, stories, family history, the wisdom of elders. Entire generations could pass knowledge without writing a single word. Instead, history lived within memory. Grandparents shared stories beside evening fires. Children listened carefully, learning not only events but values, respect, generosity, patience, humility. Every story carried a lesson. Every lesson strengthened the community. Exactly how far back the ancestors of the Sioux lived upon the Great Plains remains difficult to answer. Archaeologists, linguists, and indigenous oral traditions each offer important pieces of the puzzle. Many scholars believe the ancestors of the Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota originally lived farther east, near the woodlands surrounding the upper Mississippi River and the Great Lakes. These regions looked very different from the vast grasslands most people now associate with the Sioux. Imagine thick forests stretching for countless miles, towering oak, maple, birch, and pine trees creating cool shade throughout the summer. Clear lakes reflected the morning sky. Beavers built dams across quiet streams. Fish filled the rivers. Deer moved silently between the trees. Families gathered wild rice from shallow waters, using carefully carved wooden canoes. Unlike the wide open plains, these forests provided abundant timber for homes, tools, and canoes. People hunted woodland animals, collected berries, harvested nuts, and fished throughout the changing seasons. Life followed nature's gentle rhythm. Communities were closely connected through family relationships and trade. Travel often occurred by canoe during warmer months. Frozen rivers became natural roads during winter. The ancestors of the Sioux lived among many neighboring indigenous nations. Some became close trading partners. Others occasionally competed over hunting territories. Like nearly every society throughout history, relationships shifted over time. Peaceful years sometimes gave way to periods of conflict. Then peace returned once more. These changing relationships gradually influenced migration. Communities slowly expanded westward over many generations, not because of one single event, but through countless small decisions made by families seeking new opportunities. As they traveled farther west, the landscape began changing. The dense forest slowly opened. Trees became less common. The horizon stretched farther each day. Prairies appeared. Wide rivers crossed rolling grasslands. New animals filled the landscape. The buffalo, already important to many plains peoples, would eventually transform nearly every aspect of Sioux life. But that remarkable story belongs to the next chapter of our journey. For now, as the first rays of sunlight spread across the quiet prairie, the ancestors of the Sioux continue their slow movement westward. They cannot know that future generations will become legendary horsemen. They cannot imagine the names Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, or Red Cloud. Those stories still lie many centuries ahead. For now, there is only the land, the rivers, the forests, the families gathered around evening fires, and the beginning of one of North America's greatest historical journeys. So settle in comfortably, because our story has only just begun. Long before the arrival of European explorers, long before horses galloped across the Great Plains, the ancestors of the Sioux were already adapting to a changing world. Their journey westward had not happened in a single generation. It unfolded slowly, across centuries. Families packed their belongings. Children grew into parents. Parents became grandparents. Stories passed from one campfire to the next. And little by little, their homeland changed. Imagine waking before sunrise somewhere along the upper Mississippi River around the year 1200. A light mist hangs over the quiet water. The air smells of pine trees and damp earth. Birdsong fills the forest as the first rays of morning sunlight filter through the branches. Nearby, a small village is beginning to stir. Smoke rises gently from cooking fires. Dogs stretch lazily after a peaceful night. Children quietly emerge from their homes, while elders greet one another with warm smiles. The day has begun. Unlike the image many people have of the Sioux riding across endless grasslands, their earliest ancestors lived among forests, lakes, and rivers. These waterways served as the great highways of North America. Travel by canoe was often faster than walking through dense woodland. Skilled craftsmen carved graceful canoes from birch bark, light enough for one person to carry, yet strong enough to transport entire families, and supplies across long distances. Imagine one of these canoes gliding silently across calm water. The only sound comes from wooden paddles gently dipping beneath the surface. The river reflects the bright blue sky above. Fish swim beneath the canoe. Turtles rest upon sun-warmed logs. An eagle watches patiently from a tall pine tree. The journey itself feels peaceful, almost timeless. The villages scattered throughout these forests blended naturally into their surroundings. Homes were built using materials gathered nearby. Wooden frames supported coverings made from bark or woven mats. Everything came from the land. Nothing was wasted. Trees provided shelter. Stone became tools. Animal hides became clothing. Plants supplied food and medicine. The relationship between people and nature remained deeply connected. Every season brought different responsibilities. Spring marked the return of warmer weather. Ice slowly disappeared from rivers. Families repaired canoes damaged during winter. Fresh plants began growing once again. Women gathered edible roots and young shoots while hunters searched for deer moving through the forest. Summer became a season of abundance. Fish filled the rivers. Wild berries ripened beneath the warm sun. Communities traveled together to gather food that would later sustain them through colder months. Children learned by watching adults rather than sitting inside classrooms. A young boy might spend the day following experienced hunters, learning to read animal tracks, understanding changing weather, listening carefully to birds, whose calls often revealed hidden dangers nearby. A young girl might accompany her mother or grandmother while gathering plants, learning which herbs eased pain, which berries could be eaten, which roots became valuable medicines. Knowledge passed naturally through daily life. Every task became a lesson. Autumn brought perhaps the busiest season of all. Wild rice, one of the region's most valuable foods, reached maturity in shallow lakes and wetlands. Harvesting it required remarkable skill. Imagine two people moving quietly through calm water in a canoe. One gently bends the tall rice stalks over the canoe. The other carefully taps them with wooden sticks. Thousands of grains fall softly into the boat. The remaining seeds drop back into the water, ensuring next year's harvest. It was a sustainable practice refined over countless generations. Nearby, hunters prepared for winter. Deer, moose, and smaller woodland animals became increasingly important. Meat was carefully dried over slow fires. Animal hides were cleaned and softened into warm clothing. Nothing useful was discarded. Bones became tools. Sinew became thread. Antlers became needles and fishing hooks. Every part served a purpose. Then winter arrived. Snow covered the forests. Rivers froze into shining white pathways. The world became quieter. Families spent longer evenings together inside warm homes. Children gathered around elders to hear stories passed down through generations. Some explained how the stars came to fill the night sky. Others taught respect, courage, generosity, and kindness. These stories preserved history long before it was written down. For the ancestors of the Sioux, memory itself became a library. Imagine sitting beside one of those evening fires. The flames dance softly against wooden walls outside. Snowflakes drift silently beneath a sky filled with countless stars. Inside, an elder begins speaking. No one interrupts. Children listen carefully. Every word matters. One day, they will tell these same stories to their own grandchildren. This oral tradition became one of the strongest foundations of Sioux culture. Even centuries later, long after moving on to the Great Plains, the importance of storytelling remained unchanged. As generations passed, small groups gradually explored farther west. No one could know exactly what awaited them beyond the forests. Only curiosity, opportunity, and changing circumstances encouraged continued movement. Eventually, the landscape began transforming. The towering trees became fewer. The rivers widened. Rolling hills replaced dense woodland. Then, almost suddenly, the forest opened into something astonishing. The prairie. Imagine standing where the trees finally end. Before you stretches an ocean of grass reaching farther than the eye can see. Golden waves ripple beneath the wind. Wildflowers cover gentle hillsides. The sky appears impossibly large, without forests blocking the horizon. Sunrise and sunset become magnificent displays of color stretching across the heavens. The prairie possessed its own remarkable beauty, different from the forests, yet equally alive. Millions of buffalo wandered across these grasslands. Some herds stretched for miles. Travelers later described the earth trembling beneath their footsteps. Pronghorn antelope raced across the open country. Prairie dogs chirped beside countless burrows. Coyotes called through the evening air. Hawks circled patiently overhead, searching for movement below. The plains offered new opportunities, but they also demanded new skills. Living in open country differed greatly from life among forests. Shelter needed to be lighter. Travel became more frequent. Hunting required different techniques. Communities gradually adapted patiently, generation after generation. This transformation did not erase their past. Instead, it added another chapter to their history. They carried old traditions with them while embracing new ways of living. Family remained central. Respect for elders continued. Storytelling endured. Spiritual beliefs stayed deeply rooted in the natural world. Only the landscape had changed, and perhaps the future, because hidden within these endless grasslands waited an animal that would forever reshape Sioux history: the horse. For now, that remarkable companion had not yet arrived. The people traveled mostly on foot. Dogs helped carry belongings using simple wooden travois. Journeys remained slower. Villages moved carefully with the changing seasons. But somewhere far to the south, Spanish explorers had already brought horses to North America. Some escaped into the wild. Others spread gradually between indigenous nations through trade. Over many decades, those horses would move northward, until finally, they reached the Sioux, and when they did, everything would change. Life upon the Great Plains would never be the same again. The buffalo hunts would become faster. Travel would become easier. Warriors would become legendary horsemen. The vast prairie, already beautiful, would become their true home. But that is the story waiting patiently for us in the next chapter. As the generations passed, the ancestors of the Sioux settled more deeply into the northern plains. The forests still lay behind them. The great rivers continued to guide their journeys. But now, the endless prairie had become part of their identity. The land seemed to stretch forever on clear mornings. You could stand atop a gentle hill and see nothing but rolling grass beneath an enormous blue sky. There were no mountains blocking the horizon, no towering forests surrounding the villages, only the wind, constant and gentle, moving across the prairie like invisible waves upon a vast green sea. For the Sioux, this landscape was far more than simply a place to live. It became a teacher. Every season brought new lessons. Every sunrise offered another opportunity to observe nature. The people understood that survival depended not on conquering the land, but on understanding it. Imagine waking before dawn inside a small camp somewhere along the Missouri River, around the year 1450. The stars still sparkle overhead. The cool morning air carries the scent of prairie grass dampened by dew. Nearby, a small fire crackles softly. An elder quietly adds another piece of wood while whispering a morning prayer of gratitude. The camp slowly begins to awaken. Children rub sleep from their eyes. Dogs stretch beside the fire. Women prepare the first meal of the day. Hunters quietly inspect their bows before leaving camp. No one rushes. Life follows a steady rhythm shaped by the rising and setting of the sun. Unlike modern society, there are no clocks, no calendars hanging on walls. Time is measured differently, by the return of migrating birds, by the blooming of wildflowers, by the first snowfall, by the movement of buffalo across the plains. Nature itself becomes the calendar. Everything possesses its proper season. Among the Sioux, family formed the heart of daily life. Several related families often lived together in small communities. Grandparents played an especially important role. They cared for young children while parents hunted or gathered food. More importantly, they became living libraries. Every evening, stories flowed naturally around the campfire. Some explained how the world had been created. Others honored brave ancestors. Many taught valuable lessons about generosity, honesty, patience, and respect. Imagine sitting quietly beside one of these evening fires. Above you, thousands of stars fill the clear prairie sky without city lights. The Milky Way stretches from one horizon to the other like a glowing river. A grandfather begins telling an old story. His voice remains calm, unhurried. Children lean forward to listen. Even the adults remain silent. They have heard the story many times before, yet each telling reveals something new. One story might explain why the buffalo willingly gave themselves to the people. Another teaches the importance of courage without arrogance. Still another reminds everyone that every living thing possesses its own spirit. The Sioux believed that the world was filled with relationships. Humans, animals, plants, rivers, the wind itself, everything deserved respect. Nothing existed entirely alone. This understanding shaped every part of daily life. Before a hunt, hunters often offered prayers of gratitude. When gathering plants, women harvested only what was needed. Children learned from an early age never to waste food or take more than nature could provide. Balance mattered, harmony mattered, generosity mattered. The natural world was not viewed simply as a resource. It was considered a relative, a partner, a sacred gift. Many Sioux traditions centered around a spiritual force often understood today as Wakantanka. Although modern translations sometimes describe Wakantanka as the Great Spirit, the idea is far more profound. Rather than one simple definition, Yakut represented the sacred mystery present throughout creation, the power flowing through the sky, the rivers, the animals, the people. Everything belonged within that sacred circle of life. Imagine standing alone upon the prairie just before sunrise. The eastern horizon slowly turns shades of gold and crimson. A gentle breeze moves through the tall grass. Somewhere nearby, a meadowlark begins singing. In the distance, a herd of buffalo grazes peacefully. Moments like these reminded the Sioux that they belonged to something far greater than themselves. Spirituality did not exist only inside ceremonies. It existed everywhere, in every sunrise, every river, every changing season. Children learned these beliefs naturally. No written books explained them. Instead, parents demonstrated kindness through their actions. Grandparents shared wisdom through stories. Hunters taught respect by thanking the animals they harvested. Knowledge passed quietly from one generation to the next. Ceremonies also played an important role. Although many sacred traditions remain private today and deserve respectful treatment, historians know that prayer, singing, drumming, and communal gatherings strengthened bonds between families and neighboring communities. These gatherings celebrated life itself. They reminded everyone that no individual stood alone. The entire community shared responsibility for one another. Music accompanied many important moments. Simple drums echoed across the plains. Flutes produced gentle melodies carried by the evening wind. Voices joined together in songs remembered across generations. Some honored successful hunts. Others welcomed new children into the community. Still others offered comfort during times of loss. Music became another way of preserving history. Every song carried memory. Every melody connected the past with the present. As children grew older, they gradually accepted greater responsibilities. Young boys learned patience while observing the experienced hunters. They practiced using bows carefully crafted from wood and animal sinew. Accuracy mattered far more than strength. A successful hunter remained calm, attentive, respectful. Young girls learned remarkable skills as well. They prepared hides, created beautifully decorated clothing, gathered useful plants, maintained homes, cared for younger children. Many also became gifted artists, using porcupine quills dyed with natural colors. They created intricate geometric designs upon clothing and ceremonial objects. Long before glass beads reached the plains, quill work represented one of North America's finest artistic traditions. Every design told a story, every pattern carried meaning, even clothing reflected the surrounding world. Animal hides provided warmth during cold winters. Decorations often honored family achievements or spiritual beliefs. Nothing existed purely for appearance. Beauty and purpose worked together. As peaceful as daily life often appeared, the prairie demanded resilience. Storms could arrive suddenly. Harsh winters tested every family. Drought occasionally reduced available food. Communities survived by helping one another. Generosity became one of the highest virtues. Those blessed with abundant food shared with neighbors experiencing hardship. Strong families supported weaker ones. No one prospered entirely alone. This sense of community would later become one of the Sioux Nation's greatest strengths. Unknown to them, change was already approaching. Far beyond the southern plains, Spanish explorers had introduced horses to North America. Some escaped into the wild. Others spread gradually through trade between indigenous nations. Year after year, The remarkable animals moved farther north. No one within the Sioux camps yet realized what was coming. Children still played beside dogs pulling wooden travois. Hunters still traveled on foot. Life followed the same gentle rhythm it had for generations. But soon, a new companion would arrive, one that could outrun the buffalo, carry families across enormous distances, transform hunting, travel, trade, and even warfare. The horse would become far more than an animal. It would become part of Sioux identity itself. And when the first horses finally appeared upon the northern plains, a new chapter in Sioux history would begin, one that would forever change the Great Plains and the people who called it home. For countless generations, the people of the Sioux had walked the Great Plains. Their dogs carried supplies using wooden travois. Families traveled carefully with the changing seasons. Hunters followed buffalo herds across vast stretches of grassland. Life was peaceful, steady, and deeply connected to the rhythms of nature. Then, everything began to change, not overnight, not within a single year, but slowly, like ripples spreading across a quiet lake. Far to the south, in the early 16th century, Spanish explorers had brought horses to North America. Some escaped from settlements. Others wandered into the wild after battles or storms. These animals adapted remarkably well to the open grasslands. Within only a few generations, wild herds spread across much of the American Southwest. Neighboring indigenous nations quickly recognized their value. Through trade, diplomacy, and occasional conflict, horses gradually moved northward, decade after decade, village after village, until finally, by the late 17th century, they reached the northern plains, and eventually, the Sioux. Imagine being among the first Sioux hunters to see a horse. The morning sun rises over endless prairie. The wind carries the scent of fresh grass. In the distance, a group of unfamiliar animals moves gracefully across the hills. Unlike deer, unlike elk, unlike buffalo, they run with astonishing speed. Their manes ripple like flowing rivers beneath the sunlight. Their powerful hooves barely seem to touch the earth. At first, many people simply watched in quiet amazement. No one could fully imagine how completely these magnificent animals would transform everyday life. The horse quickly became far more than transportation. It reshaped nearly every aspect of Sioux society. Travel that once required many days could now be completed in only a fraction of the time. Families could follow buffalo herds more easily. Trade expanded across enormous distances. Messages traveled faster. Communities separated by hundreds of miles remained connected more often than ever before. The Great Plains suddenly felt much smaller. Imagine a family preparing to move camp before horses arrived. Dogs patiently wait beside wooden travois loaded with hides, cooking pots, tools, and carefully bundled belongings. The journey moves steadily, but slowly. Now imagine that same family several generations later. Beautiful horses stand quietly beside the camp. Larger travois rest behind them. Children ride comfortably while elders travel with greater ease. The entire camp moves gracefully across the prairie beneath the wide blue sky. The transformation is remarkable. The horse also changed hunting forever. Before horses, buffalo hunts demanded extraordinary planning. Hunters often worked together to guide herds toward natural cliffs or carefully prepared traps. Success depended upon patience, cooperation, and intimate knowledge of buffalo behavior. These methods remained highly effective, but they required tremendous effort. With horses, everything changed. Imagine riding across the prairie beside experienced Sioux hunters. The ground trembles beneath thousands of buffalo. Dust rises into the warm afternoon air. The riders lean forward gently. Their horses respond almost as if sharing the same thoughts. Without unnecessary shouting, without confusion, Horse and rider move together as one. The distance between hunter and buffalo closes rapidly. A carefully aimed arrow flies. Moments later, the herd continues running. While selected animals provide food for the entire community, the horse made hunting faster, safer, and more efficient. Yet even during successful hunts, respect remained central. The buffalo was never viewed simply as an animal. For the Sioux, it represented life itself. Food, shelter, clothing, tools. Everything came from the buffalo. The meat nourished families. The hides became warm robes and coverings for teepees. Bones transformed into tools. Horns became spoons and cups. Sinew served as thread. Even dried buffalo dung provided valuable fuel where trees remained scarce. Very little was wasted. Imagine walking through a Sioux camp after a successful buffalo hunt. Women carefully prepare fresh meat for drying. Children help gather useful materials. Craftsmen shape bone into needles and scrapers. Nearby, several women stretch fresh hides upon wooden frames, patiently scraping and softening each one until it becomes smooth leather. Some of these hides will become warm winter clothing. Others will cover the great homes of the plains, the teepee. Today, the teepee has become one of the best known symbols of Plains indigenous cultures. Its elegant design reflected generations of practical knowledge. Long wooden poles leaned together to form a strong cone. Buffalo hides covered the frame. A carefully placed smoke opening allowed cooking fires to burn safely inside. The entrance usually faced east, greeting each new sunrise. Despite their impressive appearance, teepees could be assembled or taken down surprisingly quickly. This flexibility perfectly suited a people following the seasonal movement of buffalo. Inside, life felt warm and welcoming. Soft buffalo robes covered the ground. Personal belongings remained neatly arranged around the circular walls. Cooking utensils hung nearby. Children played while grandparents shared stories beside the fire. Although the outside world often appeared vast and open, the teepee created a peaceful place where families gathered together each evening. The arrival of horses also influenced leadership. Owning many healthy horses became a sign of prosperity, but wealth carried responsibility. Generous leaders shared horses with relatives who needed them. A respected person earned admiration not by keeping everything, but by giving freely. Generosity remained one of the highest virtues within Sioux society. Imagine a respected elder presenting several horses to a young couple beginning their own family. The gift represents far more than property. It expresses trust, support, and hope for the future. The entire community benefits when families help one another. The horse also became deeply woven into Sioux culture. Children formed close bonds with them from an early age. Young boys learned to ride long before becoming hunters. Girls developed remarkable skill caring for horses and helping manage family herds. Many horses even received names reflecting their appearance or personality. Strong relationships developed between rider and animal. Trust mattered greatly. A calm horse often meant the difference between safety and danger. Artists celebrated horses through painted robes, decorated equipment, and songs. Stories describing famous horses passed from one generation to another. Some became remembered almost as fondly as great leaders themselves. As horse culture expanded, the Sioux gradually extended their influence across larger portions of the northern Great Plains. Travel became easier. Trade networks reached farther. Neighboring nations exchanged goods, including pipes, buffalo robes, stone tools, medicinal plants, and beautifully crafted artwork. Not every meeting involved conflict, far from it. Much of life centered upon diplomacy, trade, marriage between communities, shared ceremonies, and mutual respect. The Plains became a vibrant world connected by countless relationships. Yet change continued approaching from the east. Along distant rivers, European traders were slowly expanding deeper into the continent. French voyageurs paddled canoes through northern waterways. Fur traders established new trading posts. Metal tools, firearms, glass beads, and woven cloth began entering indigenous trade networks. At first, these newcomers appeared only occasionally. Their arrivals seemed little more than another opportunity for exchange. Few realized that these first peaceful meetings would eventually transform the entire continent. For now, the Sioux continued living much as they always had, following the buffalo, honoring the seasons, raising children beneath the endless prairie sky. Their horses grazed peacefully beside winding rivers. Campfires glowed warmly beneath brilliant stars. The Great Plains had become their home, and in the quiet distance, the next chapter of their remarkable history was already beginning. It would arrive not with armies, but with traders carrying unfamiliar goods, new ideas, and a world unlike anything the Sioux had ever known. By the beginning of the 17th century, the Great Plains still stretched endlessly beneath the open sky. Buffalo continued their ancient migrations. The seasons followed their familiar rhythm. Children laughed beside evening campfires. Families packed their teepees and moved with the changing herds. To many Sioux communities, life seemed much as it always had, yet hundreds of miles away. A different world was slowly moving closer. European explorers had begun crossing the vast rivers and forests of North America. French voyageurs paddled slender birch bark canoes deep into the interior. Merchants followed winding waterways, carrying goods unlike anything many indigenous nations had ever seen. Their arrival did not happen suddenly. There were no enormous armies sweeping across the northern plains. Instead, change arrived quietly, one canoe at a time, one trading post at a time, one new friendship at a time. Imagine standing beside the Mississippi River on a cool spring morning around the year 1650. The mist still lingers above the water. Birds sing from nearby cottonwood trees. Suddenly, far downstream, several unfamiliar canoes appear. They glide silently toward the riverbank. The men inside wear heavy wool clothing instead of buffalo hides. Some wear broad-brimmed hats. Others carry long metal tools unlike anything seen before. As they step ashore, both groups pause. No one speaks immediately. Each side studies the other with quiet curiosity. Neither truly knows what to expect. These first meetings often depended upon patience. Smiles crossed language barriers. Simple hand gestures replaced spoken conversation. Small gifts were exchanged. A polished knife, a beautifully carved pipe, a string of colorful glass beads, a carefully prepared buffalo robe. Trade began long before either side understood the other's language. For the French, the vast interior of North America represented opportunity. Beaver pelts had become incredibly valuable in Europe. Fashionable hats made from beaver felt were highly sought after. The demand seemed endless. French merchants depended upon indigenous hunters to supply these valuable furs. For many indigenous nations, trade offered exciting new possibilities. Metal knives remained sharp far longer than stone blades. Iron cooking pots lasted for years. Copper kettles proved remarkably useful. Steel axes made cutting wood much easier. Glass beads introduced entirely new artistic possibilities. Imagine a Sioux craftswoman examining a handful of bright blue glass beads for the first time. The sunlight catches their polished surfaces. Unlike shells or porcupine quills, these beads sparkle brilliantly. Soon, she begins creating intricate patterns upon clothing and ceremonial bags. Old artistic traditions remain, but new materials allow fresh forms of creativity. Trade rarely replaced Sioux culture. Instead, the Sioux adapted useful items while preserving their own traditions. This ability to adapt would become one of their greatest strengths. The French also brought firearms. At first, these weapons remained uncommon, expensive, difficult to repair, and slow to reload. Many hunters continued relying upon bows because they remained quieter and more dependable. Yet over time, firearms gradually spread across the northern plains. They changed hunting, they changed warfare, and they altered relationships between neighboring nations. Communities with easier access to European trade often gained important advantages. This encouraged new trading partnerships, but also new rivalries. The Sioux quickly recognized that maintaining strong trade relationships benefited everyone. Some families traveled hundreds of miles to reach important trading posts. Imagine arriving at one of these bustling frontier settlements. Dozens of canoes rest beside the riverbank. French traders unload barrels of supplies. Nearby, indigenous hunters display neatly prepared beaver pelts. Women examine brightly colored cloth. Children watch blacksmiths hammer glowing iron into useful tools. Many different languages fill the air: French, Dakota, Ojibwe, Cree, and several others. No single culture dominates the marketplace. Instead, the trading post becomes a meeting place where ideas travel alongside goods. Some Europeans learned indigenous languages remarkably well. Some indigenous leaders became skilled negotiators with French merchants. Mutual respect often developed through years of repeated encounters. Many traders even married indigenous women. These marriages strengthened trust between communities. Children born into these families often grew up speaking multiple languages and understanding several cultures. Not every meeting remained peaceful. Misunderstandings occasionally occurred. Trade disagreements sometimes led to conflict. European diseases, unknown in North America before contact, gradually spread through many indigenous communities. Smallpox proved especially devastating. Without previous exposure, entire villages sometimes suffered terrible losses. Imagine a quiet camp where only weeks earlier children had been playing happily beside the river. Now, cooking fires burn lower than usual. Families gather silently outside their homes. Healers work tirelessly to comfort the sick. No one fully understands where the illness came from or why it spread so quickly. These epidemics changed countless lives across North America. Even communities living far from European settlements sometimes experienced outbreaks through expanding trade networks. Despite these hardships, the Sioux demonstrated remarkable resilience. Communities supported one another during difficult times. Families adopted orphaned children into their homes. Knowledge continued passing between generations. Life endured. Trade also introduced something less visible than tools or weapons. News. Travelers carried stories from distant regions, reports of new rivers, new nations, new opportunities, and occasionally new dangers. Around evening campfires, visitors described places hundreds of miles away. Some spoke of enormous lakes stretching beyond the horizon. Others described strange animals never before seen. French explorers shared stories of great oceans lying far to the east. Indigenous travelers spoke of vast buffalo herds roaming the western plains. The world seemed to grow larger with every passing year. As trade expanded, the Sioux themselves became increasingly important participants within these growing networks. Buffalo robes produced by Sioux families became highly valued. Their horses attracted attention from neighboring nations. Their knowledge of the northern plains made them respected trading partners. Their influence slowly expanded. Yet beneath this growing prosperity, competition also increased. Neighboring nations sometimes competed for access to valuable hunting grounds. Control of important trade routes became increasingly significant. Diplomacy remained essential. Wise leaders preferred peaceful negotiation whenever possible. War remained only one option among many. Gift giving, marriage alliances, shared ceremonies, and careful conversation often achieved far more lasting results. The greatest leaders understood that lasting peace benefited everyone. As the 17th century gradually gave way to the 18th, the Sioux Nation stood at an important crossroads. Their culture remained deeply rooted in ancient traditions. Families still gathered inside warm teepees beneath the stars. Children still learned through stories. Hunters still honored the buffalo. The prairie remained their home, yet the continent itself was changing. European settlements slowly expanded. New empires competed for influence. The French, the British, and eventually the young United States would all look westward. For now, those future conflicts remained distant. The Sioux continued building strong communities across the northern plains. Their horses grazed peacefully beside quiet rivers. Trade flourished. Families prospered. And beneath the endless sky, a new generation grew up believing the prairie would always remain as it had been. They could not yet know that before another century had passed, the greatest challenge in their history would begin approaching from the eastern horizon. As the 18th century unfolded and the Sioux had become one of the great peoples of the northern Great Plains, their villages rose and disappeared with the seasons. Their horses grazed across endless grasslands. Their hunters followed the buffalo wherever the great herds wandered. To outsiders, life on the prairie might have seemed simple, but in truth, every day required remarkable skill. Nothing happened by chance. Every task, every journey, every decision reflected generations of experience, passed carefully from one family to the next. Imagine waking just before sunrise on a warm summer morning somewhere near the Missouri River, around the year 1750. The eastern sky glows softly with shades of pink and gold. A cool breeze carries the scent of prairie sage. Nearby, horses quietly graze while buffalo robes covering the teepees gently ripple in the morning wind. Smoke rises slowly from the first cooking fires. The camp is beginning to awaken. An elder steps outside his teepee. He pauses for a moment, looking toward the rising sun, offering a quiet prayer of gratitude for another day upon the plains. Nearby, children begin laughing as they chase one another between the homes. Dogs stretch lazily after a peaceful night. The camp feels calm, comfortable, alive. Life among the Sioux followed a rhythm shaped by the seasons rather than by clocks. Every member of the community contributed in meaningful ways. No task was considered unimportant. Everyone possessed knowledge worth sharing. Women held central roles within Sioux society. They cared for children, prepared meals, built and maintained the family's teepee, processed buffalo hides into soft leather, created warm clothing for every season, gathered edible plants and medicinal herbs. Their knowledge of the land proved extraordinary. Imagine watching a skilled Sioux woman preparing a buffalo hide. The fresh hide rests upon a wooden frame stretched tightly beneath the afternoon sun. Using carefully crafted bone and metal tools, she patiently scrapes away every remaining layer. The work requires strength, but also patience. Hours later, the hide begins to soften. Eventually, it becomes supple enough for clothing, blankets, moccasins, or the covering of a family's teepee. Nothing is hurried. Quality matters. Each finished hide reflects years of practice. Many women also became gifted artists, long before brightly colored commercial fabrics appeared on the plains. Sioux clothing already displayed remarkable beauty. Porcupine quills carefully dyed with natural colors formed intricate geometric designs. Later, glass beads obtained through trade added brilliant blues, whites, reds, and yellows. Every decoration carried meaning. Some honored family achievements, others reflected spiritual beliefs. Still others celebrated important moments in life. Clothing became both practical and artistic. Nearby, men prepared for the day's hunt. Before leaving camp, experienced hunters gathered quietly to discuss recent observations. Where had the buffalo been seen yesterday? How had the wind changed overnight? Would the weather remain favorable? Successful hunting depended far more upon careful planning than simple bravery. Imagine riding alongside a group of Sioux hunters as they move silently across the open prairie. The horses seem almost weightless beneath them. No one speaks loudly. Every rider watches the horizon carefully. Then, far in the distance, dark shapes begin appearing. At first, only a few, then dozens, then hundreds, finally, thousands. An enormous buffalo herd slowly moves across the grasslands like a living river. The ground trembles beneath countless hooves. Dust rises into the clear blue sky. The hunters pause. There is no excitement, no shouting, only quiet concentration. The leader studies the wind, the herd's direction, the surrounding landscape. Every movement must be carefully considered. When the hunt finally begins, horse and rider move together almost effortlessly. Years of experience become visible in every graceful turn, every carefully aimed arrow. The goal is never to kill unnecessarily. Only enough buffalo are harvested to meet the community's needs. Afterward, the real work begins. Families gather together. Nothing is wasted. Fresh meat is carefully divided among every household. Some is cooked immediately over open fires. Much more is sliced into thin strips and dried beneath the summer sun. This preserved meat, known today as jerky, could last for many months. Other portions became pemmican, a remarkable food combining dried buffalo meat with rendered fat and sometimes berries. Lightweight, nutritious, and capable of lasting throughout long journeys. It became one of the most valuable foods on the Great Plains. Children eagerly joined the work, learning through observation rather than formal instruction. A young boy might help carry meat back to camp. A young girl might gather useful plants growing nearby. Neither viewed these tasks as chores. Instead, they became opportunities to learn responsibility. The Sioux believed children learned best through participation. Adults rarely shouted or demanded obedience through fear. Instead, they demonstrated patience, leading by example, encouraging curiosity, teaching through stories and experience. As the afternoon passes, the camp becomes wonderfully busy. Women prepare meals. Hunters repair bows. Others care for the horses. Elders sit together beneath the shade of a cottonwood tree discussing old memories. Teenagers practice riding across the prairie. Laughter drifts gently through the warm air. Life feels balanced. Community matters more than individual achievement. Generosity remains one of the highest virtues. Imagine a hunter returning with an especially successful harvest. Rather than keeping everything for his own family, he shares generously. Widows receive fresh meat. Elders receive the finest portions. Families struggling through difficult times receive assistance without embarrassment. Respect follows generosity, not wealth. A person earned honor by helping others, not by possessing the most horses or the largest teepee. Leadership followed similar principles. Contrary to popular imagination, a Sioux chief did not simply command people. Leadership had to be earned. Wise leaders listened carefully before speaking. They settled disagreements peacefully whenever possible. They inspired confidence through kindness, wisdom, and generosity. If a leader lost the trust of the people, others naturally emerged. Authority depended upon respect rather than force. Evenings became perhaps the most peaceful time of day. The day's work gradually ended. Horses returned from grazing. Cooking fires glowed warmly. Families gathered inside their teepees. Outside, the prairie slowly darkened beneath an endless sky filled with stars. Imagine sitting quietly beside one of those evening fires. The aroma of roasted buffalo fills the air. Children curl beneath soft buffalo robes. Somewhere nearby, a flute begins playing a gentle melody. Its notes drift softly across the quiet camp. An elder begins telling another story, perhaps about a clever coyote, perhaps about the stars, perhaps about an ancestor remembered for remarkable courage and generosity. No written books preserve these moments, yet through careful listening, every child carries the stories forward, generation after generation. As summer gradually fades into autumn, preparations for winter begin. Extra meat is carefully stored, warm clothing inspected, horses grow thicker coats. Families watch the changing colors of the prairie. Nature quietly announces the arrival of another season. Life continues, steady, peaceful, connected to the land. Yet beyond the eastern forests, the world continues changing. The French Empire is weakening, the British are expanding, and soon, after another great war between European powers, an entirely new nation will begin looking west, the United States of America. At first, its settlers will seem very distant, little more than unfamiliar names carried by traders. But with every passing year, more roads will appear, more forts will be built, more wagons will cross the plains, the quiet world of the Sioux, so carefully shaped over countless generations, will soon face challenges unlike any it had known before. But for this evening, the camp remains peaceful. The stars shine brightly overhead. The buffalo graze somewhere beyond the dark horizon, and beneath the vast prairie sky, the Sioux continue living in harmony with the land they have come to call home. As the 18th century slowly gave way to the 19th, the Great Plains remained as beautiful as ever. The wind still rolled across endless seas of grass. Millions of buffalo continued their ancient migrations. Campfires glowed beneath brilliant stars, and the Sioux still followed the rhythms of the land that had sustained them for generations. Yet far beyond the eastern horizon, a new nation was growing, the United States of America. After gaining independence from Britain in 1783, the young republic looked toward the vast lands beyond the Mississippi River. To many American leaders, the West represented possibility, rich farmland, new settlements, trade, opportunity. To the Sioux, it was already home. Imagine standing upon a quiet bluff overlooking the Missouri River around the year 1800. The river flows gently below. Cottonwood trees sway softly in the summer breeze. Nearby, a Sioux camp rests peacefully beside the water. Children laugh while chasing one another through the grass. Women prepare fresh buffalo meat. Hunters return slowly from the plains. Everything feels familiar, comforting. Then, far away along the river, a different kind of boat appears, long, wooden, unlike the canoes usually seen upon these waters. Its crew wears unfamiliar clothing. Some carry notebooks. Others carry surveying instruments. One man pauses frequently to sketch the landscape. The world is beginning to change. In 1803, the United States completed one of the largest land purchases in history, known today as the Louisiana Purchase. It doubled the size of the young nation almost overnight. The land had been purchased from France, yet much of it was already home to dozens of indigenous nations, including many Sioux communities. The purchase appeared straightforward on paper, lines drawn upon maps, documents signed in distant government buildings. But for the people already living there, nothing had truly been bought. The rivers, the plains, the forests, these places had never belonged to France in the way European governments imagined. For the Sioux, the land was not property, it was family. It provided life, food, shelter, and identity. Only 1 year later, in 1804, President Thomas Jefferson sent 2 men westward, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. Their expedition would become one of the most famous journeys in American history. Imagine watching their boats slowly approach along the Missouri River. The soldiers wear blue military coats. American flags flutter gently in the wind. The explorers stop frequently, recording plants, animals, rivers, mountains. Everything seems new to them, to the Sioux. Much of it has been familiar for countless generations. Lewis and Clark understood something important. Their journey depended upon peaceful relationships with the indigenous nations. Without local knowledge, travel across the continent would prove almost impossible. Throughout their expedition, they met dozens of different peoples. Some welcomed them warmly, others remained cautious. Among those they encountered were several Sioux groups. The meetings varied. Some involved the exchange of gifts, others became tense. One of the most famous occurred with the Teton Sioux, today more commonly known as the Lakota. The meeting began respectfully. Pipes were shared, food exchanged, conversations attempted despite language barriers. Yet misunderstandings soon emerged. The Lakota expected gifts as part of long-established diplomatic traditions. Lewis and Clark viewed some of these expectations differently. For a brief moment, the situation grew dangerously tense. Weapons remained close at hand, voices rose. Both sides carefully watched the other. Fortunately, neither wished to begin a battle. Calmer voices eventually prevailed. The expedition continued westward. Although no fighting occurred, the meeting revealed something important. The Americans and the Sioux often understood diplomacy through very different traditions. Neither side fully recognized how differently the other viewed the world. Over the following decades, American traders became increasingly common along the Missouri River. Trading posts appeared beside important waterways. Steamboats gradually replaced many traditional riverboats. Metal goods, blankets, coffee, sugar, and manufactured tools became easier to obtain through trade. Some Sioux families welcomed these opportunities. Others worried about growing dependence upon foreign goods, as always. The Sioux adapted thoughtfully. Useful items became part of daily life. But many traditions remained unchanged. Children still learned through stories. Ceremonies continued. The buffalo remained central to life. The horse remained essential. Trade expanded, yet the heart of Sioux culture endured. Meanwhile, the United States continued growing rapidly. New towns appeared farther west each year. Roads stretched across previously unsettled regions. Government officials negotiated treaties with many indigenous nations. To American leaders, these treaties represented legal agreements. To many Sioux leaders, they represented promises built upon trust and mutual respect. Unfortunately, each side often interpreted these agreements differently. Imagine a treaty council held beneath the open prairie sky. American officials sit beneath canvas tents. Military officers stand nearby. Across from them, Sioux leaders gather in quiet discussion. Interpreters move carefully between both groups. Each sentence requires translation. Each idea must cross not only language, but culture. The Americans produce written documents, pages filled with signatures. The Sioux rely more heavily upon spoken promises. Both believe they are reaching understanding. Yet small differences in interpretation slowly accumulate. Years later, those differences would become sources of profound disagreement. For now, most interactions remained peaceful, trade flourished, diplomacy continued, but another change quietly approached. Fur-bearing animals became less abundant after decades of intensive trapping. The great fur trade slowly declined. At the same time, American settlers increasingly looked westward, not simply for trade, but for permanent homes. Families loaded their belongings into covered wagons. Farmers searched for fertile land. Missionaries established churches. Military forts appeared beside important rivers. The landscape itself slowly began changing. Imagine riding across the prairie where only a generation earlier buffalo had grazed undisturbed. Now, a small wooden fort rises beside the river. Smoke curls upward from chimneys. American soldiers patrol nearby. A blacksmith's hammer echoes through the afternoon air. It is still only one building, only one settlement, yet it marks the beginning of something much larger. The Sioux observed these developments carefully. Their leaders understood that every new fort brought more travelers, more wagons, more roads. The prairie itself seemed gradually becoming busier. Still, the buffalo herds remained immense. The Sioux Nation remained strong. Its people continued living across vast portions of the northern plains. No one yet imagined how quickly events would accelerate. In only a few decades, the Oregon Trail would carry thousands of immigrants westward every year. Then would come the California Gold Rush, railroads, new territories, and increasing pressure upon Sioux lands. The peaceful meetings between explorers and tribal leaders would slowly give way to far more difficult conversations. But during these early years, hope still existed. Many believed cooperation remained possible. The prairie stretched endlessly beneath the setting sun. The rivers continued flowing, and both the Sioux and the young United States stood at the beginning of a relationship that neither side could fully understand. The choices made in the coming years would shape the future of the Great Plains forever. By the middle of the 19th century, the Great Plains had begun to change more rapidly than ever before. For generations, the Sioux had followed the buffalo across vast grasslands. The prairie had seemed endless. The rivers had flowed freely. The horizon remained open in every direction. Now, new wagon trails stretched across the landscape. Trading posts had grown into permanent settlements. Military forts stood where only buffalo had once grazed. The world that the Sioux had known for centuries was slowly being transformed. Yet amid these growing changes, one remarkable leader emerged. A man respected not only for his courage, but for his patience, his wisdom, and his determination to protect his people's homeland. His name was Red Cloud, born around 1822 near the North Platte River. Red Cloud belonged to the Oglala Lakota. As a young man, he witnessed a world in transition. He grew up during a time when the buffalo still covered the plains in unimaginable numbers. Horse culture flourished, trade expanded, yet American settlers and soldiers appeared with increasing frequency. Unlike many later leaders, Red Cloud spent years carefully observing these changes. He understood that the greatest threat did not come from one battle. It came from the steady movement of roads, settlements, and forts into Sioux territory. Imagine Red Cloud as a young warrior standing upon a ridge, overlooking the Powder River country. The afternoon sun casts long shadows across the rolling hills. Far below, a herd of buffalo moves slowly through the valley. Cottonwood trees line a winding creek. The land appears peaceful, timeless. Yet, in the distance, a thin line of wagons slowly approaches. Dust rises behind them. Each wagon carries families searching for new opportunities in the West. To those settlers, the trail represents hope. To Red Cloud, it represents change. The Powder River country lay within one of the richest hunting regions on the northern plains. Its valleys supported enormous buffalo herds. Clear streams flowed through fertile grasslands. For the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples, this country held tremendous importance. It provided food, shelter, and spiritual connection. Everything depended upon preserving these lands. Then, in the early 1860s, news spread across the American frontier. Gold had been discovered in Montana. Almost immediately, thousands of prospectors rushed toward the distant mining camps. The quickest route crossed directly through the Powder River country, known as the Bozeman Trail. This road cut through the heart of Sioux hunting grounds. Imagine standing beside that trail during the summer of 1865. Every day, another wagon train appears, then another. Horses pull heavily loaded wagons. Children wave excitedly from wooden seats. Farm animals walk beside the trail. Soon, supply wagons follow. Merchants, soldiers, blacksmiths, hunters. The road grows busier with every passing month. For the Sioux, each new traveler meant greater pressure upon the buffalo, greater disturbance of the land, and increasing uncertainty about the future. The United States government hoped to protect these travelers. Military engineers began constructing a chain of forts along the Bozeman Trail. Among them, Fort Reno, Fort Phil Kearny, and Fort C.F. Smith. To American officials, these forts offered security. To Red Cloud, they represented permanent occupation. During treaty negotiations in 1866, government representatives invited Red Cloud and other Sioux leaders to discuss peace. The meetings appeared promising at first. Officials spoke of friendship, trade, and cooperation. Yet while those discussions continued, construction crews quietly began building Fort Phil Kearny. When Red Cloud learned of this, he was deeply angered. According to several historical accounts, he rose from the council and departed without signing any agreement. In his view, how could genuine peace exist while soldiers occupied Sioux lands? The negotiations ended. Soon afterward, conflict began. History remembers this struggle as Red Cloud's War. Unlike many earlier frontier clashes, this conflict proved remarkably organized. Red Cloud understood the land intimately. He avoided unnecessary battles. Instead, his warriors relied upon careful planning, knowledge of the terrain, and extraordinary mobility. The Lakota did not fight alone. Their longtime allies, the Cheyenne and Arapaho, joined them. Together, they sought one clear objective: close the Bozeman Trail. Imagine a quiet morning near Fort Phil Kearny. Mist hangs low across the surrounding hills. American soldiers prepare their horses. Woodcutters leave the safety of the fort to gather timber from nearby forests. Everything appears routine. Then, lookouts notice riders appearing briefly upon distant ridges. Only a handful. Moments later, they disappear again. The soldiers remain alert, but nothing else happens. The next day, the same riders return, always watching, always remaining just beyond reach. These constant appearances kept the soldiers uneasy. The Sioux rarely attacked large groups directly. Instead, they studied every movement, learning routines, identifying weaknesses, waiting patiently. One of Red Cloud's greatest strengths was discipline. He understood that reckless attacks against fortified positions usually ended badly. Instead, he encouraged smaller actions that gradually weakened confidence. Supply wagons disappeared. Messengers faced increasing danger. Wood-cutting parties required heavy military escorts. Life inside the forts became increasingly difficult. Imagine living within Fort Phil Kearny during the winter of 1866. Snow covers the surrounding hills. Cold winds whistle through the wooden walls. Every journey beyond the fort carries risk. Soldiers remain constantly alert. The surrounding prairie feels vast, silent, and unpredictable. Some begin wondering whether these remote outposts can truly be defended. Then came one of the most famous moments of the war, December the 21st, 1866. A skilled Oglala warrior named Crazy Horse, still a young man, volunteered for an important role. He and several other riders approached Fort Phil Kearny. Their purpose was not to fight immediately. Instead, they hoped to lure American soldiers away from the safety of the fort. The strategy required remarkable courage. Imagine Crazy Horse riding calmly across the snowy prairie. Behind him, hidden beyond nearby ridges, hundreds of Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors wait silently. Their horses stand perfectly still. No voices break the winter air. Everything depends upon patience. The small group of riders appears vulnerable. American soldiers watching from the fort believe they have found an opportunity. Captain William J. Fetterman receives orders to pursue the warriors. His command includes about 80 soldiers. Confidently, they ride beyond the protective hills surrounding the fort, exactly as Red Cloud had hoped. What happened next became known as the Fetterman Fight. As the soldiers crossed Lodge Trail Ridge, the hidden warriors suddenly appeared from every direction. The quiet prairie erupted with movement. Horsemen swept across the snow-covered hills. The soldiers found themselves completely surrounded. The battle lasted only a short time. When it ended, none of Fetterman's command survived. It became one of the greatest defeats suffered by the United States Army on the Northern Plains up to that point. News spread quickly across the frontier. For the Sioux and their allies, the victory demonstrated that determination, careful planning, and knowledge of the land could overcome even a well-equipped army. Yet Red Cloud understood something important. One victory alone would not decide the future. The war was far from over. More soldiers would come, more forts would be built, more difficult decisions still lay ahead. But for the moment, the winds of the northern plains carried an unmistakable message. The Sioux Nation had no intention of surrendering the homeland that generations had cherished beneath the endless prairie sky. The winter of 1866 gradually faded into spring. Snow melted from the northern plains. The rivers swelled with fresh water. Buffalo once again wandered across the rolling grasslands. For the Sioux, life continued with its familiar rhythm. Families followed the herds. Children played beside the teepees. Stories were shared around evening fires. Yet, beneath this peaceful routine, the struggle with the United States had entered a new chapter. Red Cloud's war continued. The forts along the Bozeman Trail remained isolated. American soldiers still occupied Sioux hunting grounds. Neither side seemed willing to surrender its goals. Amid these uncertain years, another remarkable leader quietly emerged. A man who would later become one of the most respected warriors in North American history. His name was Crazy Horse. Unlike many famous leaders, Crazy Horse left behind very few speeches. He never sought political office. He did not desire wealth. He rarely allowed his photograph to be taken. Even today, no authenticated photograph of Crazy Horse is known to exist. Much of what historians know about him comes from the memories of those who knew him personally and from Lakota oral traditions passed through generations. Perhaps that mystery makes him even more fascinating. Imagine a young Lakota boy growing up around the year 1840. The prairie stretches endlessly beyond his family's camp. His earliest memories are filled with horses grazing beneath open skies, buffalo hunts, the sound of drums drifting across the evening air, stories told by grandparents beside warm fires. He watches experienced hunters preparing their bows. He listens carefully whenever elders speak. Every lesson matters. Every day offers another opportunity to learn. The boy, who would later become known as Crazy Horse, was born around 1840. His Lakota name at birth is believed to have been Chauha, meaning among the trees. Later, after the death of his father, he inherited the name Thashumki Witko, often translated into English as Crazy Horse. Yet the meaning is more subtle than the English words suggest. Rather than implying madness, the name reflects spiritual strength and a mysterious connection with the unseen world. From an early age, those around him noticed something different. He remained quiet, thoughtful, observant, unlike some young warriors who enjoyed boasting about their achievements. Crazy Horse rarely spoke more than necessary. He preferred listening, watching, learning. Imagine him riding alone across the prairie shortly before sunset. His horse moves calmly through the tall grass. The sky glows with shades of orange and crimson. Thousands of birds drift across the horizon. He pauses beside a small stream. Everything is still. Moments like these became important throughout his life. Many Lakota traditions value time spent alone in nature, not from loneliness, but from reflection. The natural world offered wisdom to those willing to observe it patiently. As he grew older, Crazy Horse developed extraordinary skill as a horseman. Among the Sioux, riding well represented far more than simple transportation. Horse and rider formed a partnership. A skilled warrior understood his horse almost instinctively. Trust flowed both ways. Imagine watching young riders practicing together across the open plains. They guide their horses with gentle movements, leaning low beside the animal's neck, turning sharply, stopping almost instantly, picking objects from the ground while riding at full speed. Every exercise strengthens confidence. Every ride deepens understanding. These abilities later became invaluable during both hunting and warfare. Crazy Horse also gained a reputation for generosity. When successful hunts provided abundant buffalo, he willingly shared meat with families in need. When horses were captured during raids, he often gave some away rather than keeping them. Among the Lakota, generosity earned greater respect than wealth. People admired those who helped others, not those who possessed the most. His humility became equally well known. Unlike many warriors, Crazy Horse rarely decorated himself with elaborate clothing. He often wore simple buckskin garments. He disliked unnecessary attention. His courage spoke louder than fine ornaments ever could. Spirituality remained central to his life. According to Lakota tradition, as a young man, Crazy Horse experienced a vision during a period of prayer and solitude. While the details remain sacred and should be treated respectfully, many accounts describe this vision as guiding the way he lived for the rest of his life. He believed courage should be balanced by humility. He avoided wearing large feathered war bonnets during battle. Instead, he often entered combat with only a single feather in his hair or simple markings upon his face. His appearance reflected modesty rather than pride. As Red Cloud's War continued, Crazy Horse gradually became one of its most respected military leaders. His understanding of the land proved remarkable. He knew every creek, Every hill, every hidden valley throughout much of the Powder River country, rather than relying upon large set-piece battles. He preferred patience, careful observation, quick movement. These qualities perfectly suited the open plains. Imagine standing upon a grassy ridge overlooking a narrow valley. Far below, a small group of American cavalry rides carefully along the trail. Everything appears quiet. The soldiers scan the surrounding hills, yet they see nothing unusual. Hidden beyond the ridge, Crazy Horse and several Lakota warriors wait silently. They do not rush. They simply watch, studying every movement. Sometimes, the wisest decision is not to attack at all. Knowing when to remain unseen often proved just as important as bravery. This patience earned him tremendous respect among fellow warriors. During Red Cloud's war, his ability to lure soldiers away from fortified positions became especially valuable. The famous events surrounding the Fetterman fight demonstrated these skills, pretending to retreat, moving just fast enough to encourage pursuit, then leading the soldiers toward waiting warriors hidden among the hills. It required discipline from everyone involved. No one attacked too early. No one broke formation. Success depended upon trust. The Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho allies worked together with remarkable coordination. Meanwhile, the United States government began reconsidering its strategy. Maintaining isolated forts along the Bozeman Trail had become increasingly expensive. Constant attacks disrupted travel. Supplies required heavy military escorts. Public opinion in the eastern United States slowly shifted. Many officials began wondering whether peace offered a better solution. In 1868, representatives from both sides gathered once again, this time at Fort Laramie. Unlike earlier negotiations, the circumstances had changed dramatically. Red Cloud's campaign had achieved many of its objectives. The Bozeman Trail had become nearly impossible to use safely. The forts stood isolated. American leaders recognized the need for compromise. The Treaty of Fort Laramie promised that the Powder River country would remain reserved for the Lakota and their allies. The United States also agreed to abandon the forts along the Bozeman Trail. When Red Cloud learned that the soldiers had truly begun leaving those forts, he finally agreed to sign the treaty. It marked one of the few occasions in American history when an indigenous nation achieved many of its goals through determined resistance followed by negotiation. For the Sioux, the agreement brought hope. The buffaloes still roamed freely. Their homeland remained protected. Families once again focused upon hunting, ceremonies, and raising children beneath the vast prairie sky. Many believed peace might finally endure. Yet, history had other plans. Only a few years later, far to the west, prospectors would discover glittering veins of gold deep within the sacred Black Hills. Thousands of miners would rush toward Sioux territory. Treaties would once again be tested, and both Red Cloud and Crazy Horse would face decisions even more difficult than those they had already overcome. The quiet years following the Treaty of Fort Laramie would prove brief. Beyond the western horizon, another storm was already beginning to gather. For a brief moment, peace returned to the northern plains. The Treaty of Fort Laramie, signed in 1868, had brought an end to Red Cloud's war. The United States agreed to abandon the forts along the Bozeman Trail. Soldiers quietly departed. Smoke no longer rose from military camps deep within the Powder River country. For the Lakota, it seemed that their homeland had been secured. Families once again followed the buffalo. Children rode horseback across the open prairie. Campfires glowed beneath the stars. The Great Plains breathed peacefully once more. Imagine an evening shortly after the treaty. The setting sun paints the grasslands in warm shades of gold. A gentle breeze carries the scent of sage across the hills. Horses graze quietly beside a winding creek. Nearby, families gather around cooking fires. An elder tells stories while children listen with wide eyes. Young riders race one another across the prairie before returning home as darkness slowly settles. For a little while, life feels balanced again. The Black Hills rise peacefully in the distance. Known to the Lakota as Pahasapa, the Black Hills were far more than beautiful mountains. They were sacred. Many Lakota believed the hills were the heart of their world. Ceremonies took place there. Prayers were offered there. Important visions were received there. The forests echoed with generations of memory. Towering pine trees covered the slopes. Clear streams flowed through narrow valleys. Granite cliffs rose above quiet meadows filled with deer and elk. To many visitors, the Black Hills appeared breathtaking. To the Lakota, they were home in the deepest spiritual sense. The Treaty of Fort Laramie recognized this importance. The agreement established the Great Sioux Reservation and acknowledged the Black Hills as Lakota territory. For several years, the treaty largely held. Although occasional disagreements occurred, the frontier remained calmer than it had been during the Red Cloud's War. Then, everything changed. In the summer of 1874, an expedition led by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer entered the Black Hills. Officially, the mission aimed to explore the region and identify a suitable location for a military fort. Scientists, surveyors, newspaper reporters, and hundreds of cavalry soldiers accompanied the expedition. Imagine watching their long column move slowly through the pine forest. Blue military uniforms stand out against the dark green trees. Horses carefully climb narrow mountain trails. Wagons creak over rocky ground. The sound of axes echoes as camps are established each evening. For many Lakota, the very presence of this expedition violated the treaty. The Black Hills had been promised to them. Now soldiers were exploring the region without permission. The expedition soon discovered something unexpected: gold, small flakes at first, then larger deposits. The news spread astonishingly quickly. Newspapers across the United States printed exciting headlines. Stories of rich discoveries captured the imagination of thousands. Almost overnight, prospectors began preparing for the journey west. Imagine a small mining town somewhere along the Missouri River. A newspaper arrives. Men gather eagerly outside the general store. Someone reads the headline aloud: "Gold found in the Black Hills." Within days, wagons are being loaded, pickaxes sharpened, mules purchased. Families discuss the possibilities. Some dream of striking it rich. Others simply hope for a better future. Few stop to consider that the land already belongs to someone else. By the spring of 1875, thousands of miners ignored the treaty and entered the Black Hills. They built rough camps beside streams, cut down pine forests, dug mines into the hillsides. Roads appeared where only wildlife trails had existed before. Military officials struggled to control the growing influx. The United States government faced an increasingly difficult situation. Officials recognized that the miners were violating the treaty. Yet removing thousands of settlers proved politically unpopular. Instead, government representatives attempted another solution. They offered to purchase the Black Hills from the Lakota. Several councils were held. American negotiators proposed large sums of money, food supplies, livestock, and other goods. Many believed these offers were generous, but the discussions quickly reached an impasse. For the Lakota, the Black Hills were not simply valuable land, they were sacred. How could sacred ground be sold? Imagine sitting beneath a large council tent during one of these negotiations. American officials spread maps across a wooden table. Interpreters carefully translate each sentence. Outside, hundreds of horses wait patiently beneath the open sky. Lakota leaders sit quietly together, listening, thinking. One elder finally speaks. The Black Hills cannot be sold, not because they lack value, but because their value cannot be measured. No amount of money could replace a homeland woven into the people's identity. The negotiations ended without agreement. Meanwhile, pressure from miners continued growing. The United States government eventually issued an ultimatum. Lakota bands living beyond reservation boundaries were instructed to report to designated agencies by the end of January 1876. Those who failed to appear would be considered hostile. The demand created serious difficulties. Many families spent winters following buffalo herds far from government agencies. Travel during harsh winter conditions proved dangerous. Some leaders questioned whether the order was even possible to obey. Others simply refused. Among those choosing to remain free upon the plains were Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and many other respected leaders. Imagine a winter camp deep within the Powder River country. Snow blankets the prairie. Smoke rises gently from warm teepees. Buffalo robes protect families from the bitter cold. Messengers arrive carrying news from the agencies. The government demands everyone report immediately. Silence settles across the camp. Many understand what the order truly means. Leaving the plains means leaving the buffalo, leaving independence, leaving the life their ancestors had built over countless generations. The decision weighs heavily upon every family. During these uncertain months, one leader emerged whose influence extended far beyond the battlefield. His name was Sitting Bull. Born around 1831 among the Hunkpapa Lakota, Sitting Bull possessed qualities quite different from those of Crazy Horse. While Crazy Horse became renowned primarily as a battlefield commander, Sitting Bull combined spiritual leadership with political wisdom. He spoke thoughtfully, listened carefully, inspired confidence through calm determination. Many people sought his advice during moments of uncertainty. Imagine Sitting Bull seated quietly beside an evening fire. The flames flicker softly against his weathered face. Around him, young warriors, elders, women, and children gather to listen. He does not raise his voice. He speaks slowly, choosing every word with care. He reminds the people that courage alone is not enough. They must remain united, protect one another, and remember the teachings of their ancestors. As the winter of 1875 drew to a close, the winds across the northern plains carried a growing sense of uncertainty. The treaty that had once promised peace now seemed fragile. The Black Hills filled with miners. The United States Army prepared new campaigns. Lakota camps remained scattered across the open country. The buffalo still wandered freely. The prairie still stretched endlessly toward the horizon. But everyone understood. Another great conflict was approaching, one that would soon bring together Red Cloud, Crazy Horse, and Sitting Bull, one that history would remember as the Great Sioux War, and at its heart would stand one of the most famous battles ever fought upon the American frontier. The winter snow slowly disappeared from the northern plains. As spring arrived in 1876, fresh green grass covered the rolling hills once again. The rivers flowed swiftly with melting snow from distant mountains. Buffalo herds moved across the prairie in search of new grazing lands. To an outside observer, the Great Plains appeared as peaceful as ever. Yet beneath that peaceful landscape two very different worlds were preparing for conflict. The United States government had decided that the Lakota and their allies, who remained beyond the reservations, must be brought under federal control. Military commanders received new orders. Columns of soldiers would march from several directions. Their objective seemed simple: locate the Free Sioux bands, force them onto the reservations. If they resisted, defeat them. History remembers this campaign as the Great Sioux War of 1876. Imagine opening a large military map inside an army headquarters. Officers gather around a wooden table. 3 separate routes have been carefully marked. One army will move east from Montana, another north from Wyoming, a third west from Dakota territory. The plan is straightforward: advance from multiple directions, prevent escape, surround the Sioux camps. On paper, it appears organized, even inevitable, but maps cannot always capture reality. The northern plains stretched across thousands of square miles. Rolling hills concealed entire valleys. Rivers changed course with the seasons. The buffalo moved constantly. So did the Lakota. Finding them proved far more difficult than anyone in Washington imagined. One of the principal commanders was General George Crook, an experienced officer who had spent years campaigning across the American West. Crook respected many indigenous warriors. He understood they possessed remarkable knowledge of the land. Unlike some officers, he rarely underestimated his opponents. Imagine Crook's column slowly marching north during the early spring. Cavalry horses carry heavily equipped soldiers. Supply wagons struggle across muddy trails. Scouts ride ahead searching for signs of nearby camps. Every evening, campfires spread across the prairie as cooks prepare simple meals. The journey is exhausting. Long distances separate every source of water. Dust covers uniforms during the day. Cold winds arrive each night. Far to the north, another force advanced under Colonel John Gibbon. Meanwhile, General Alfred Terry prepared a third expedition. Among Terry's officers rode one of the most famous cavalry commanders in American history, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer. Custer had already become a well-known public figure with his flowing blonde hair, colorful buckskin jacket, and reputation for bold action. Newspapers frequently wrote about him. Some admired his courage. Others believed he often took unnecessary risks. There was little middle ground. Custer inspired strong opinions wherever he went. Imagine him riding at the head of the 7th Cavalry. His horse moves confidently across the prairie. Blue-coated cavalrymen follow behind in long columns. American flags flutter above the wagons. Bugles echo softly across the open grasslands. Many soldiers believe the campaign will end quickly. Few imagine the challenges waiting ahead. Meanwhile, life continued much differently inside the Lakota and Cheyenne camps. Rather than marching according to military schedules, families followed the buffalo. Children played beside the river. Women prepared meals. Elders shared stories beneath the evening sky. Warriors cared for horses grazing across nearby hills. Imagine visiting one of these camps in early June. Hundreds of teepees stand in neat circles beside a winding river. Smoke rises gently into the morning air. Dogs wander between families. Children laugh as they race small ponies through the grass. Women scrape buffalo hides while older men quietly repair bridles and bows. The atmosphere feels surprisingly peaceful, yet everyone understands that soldiers are searching for them. Messengers arrive almost daily, bringing news from distant scouting parties. Army columns have been spotted. Forts are sending more troops. The government intends to force everyone onto the reservations. The camp prepares quietly, not with panic, but with determination. During these weeks, Sitting Bull emerged as one of the most respected voices among the gathered nations. Although not every Lakota leader agreed upon every decision, many recognized his wisdom. He encouraged unity. The Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho all gathered together in unusually large numbers. Never before had so many families camped together along the Little Bighorn region. One important event occurred shortly before the Great Battle. Sitting Bull participated in the Sun Dance, one of the most sacred ceremonies among many Plains peoples. Because aspects of this ceremony remain deeply meaningful to indigenous communities today, it deserves respectful treatment. Historical accounts record that during the ceremony, Sitting Bull experienced a powerful vision. According to Lakota tradition, he saw soldiers falling into the camp like grasshoppers from the sky. Many interpreted the vision as a sign that the people should remain united and not lose hope. Whether viewed through spiritual belief or historical tradition, the vision strengthened confidence throughout the camp. Imagine the evening after the ceremony. The prairie grows quiet beneath a sky filled with stars. Families gather around countless campfires. Soft drumming echoes across the valley. Children sleep peacefully beside their parents. Nearby, warriors quietly prepare their horses. No one knows exactly when the soldiers will arrive, only that they are coming. On June 17, 1876, the first major clash of the campaign occurred. General Crook's forces encountered Lakota and Cheyenne warriors near the Rosebud Creek. History remembers this engagement as the Battle of the Rosebud. Crazy Horse played a significant role during the fighting. Rather than launching one overwhelming attack, the warriors struck repeatedly throughout the day, moving quickly across the rugged terrain, appearing from unexpected directions, then disappearing once again. The battle remained fierce and confusing. Neither side achieved a clear tactical victory, yet its strategic consequences proved important. Afterward, General Crook decided not to continue advancing immediately. Instead, he withdrew to regroup and replenish supplies. This decision left one American army temporarily absent from the larger campaign. General Terry and Colonel Custer did not yet realize that Crook had halted his advance. They continued moving westward, believing Crook still approached from the south. This misunderstanding would soon have enormous consequences. Meanwhile, the great village along the Little Bighorn River continued growing. More Lakota, more Cheyenne, more Arapaho families arrived almost every day. Teepees stretched for remarkable distances along the riverbanks. Some later estimated that several thousand people gathered there, perhaps the largest assembly of Plains indigenous peoples ever witnessed by American soldiers. Imagine standing upon a nearby hill at sunrise. Below, hundreds upon hundreds of white buffalo hide teepees reflect the golden morning light. Horses graze peacefully beside the river. Smoke curls gently upward from countless breakfast fires. Children splash in the shallow water. Women prepare fresh buffalo meat. The valley appears calm, beautiful, almost timeless. No one looking upon the scene could easily imagine that within only a few days, it would become one of the most famous battlefields in American history. Far away, Colonel Custer studies fresh reports from his scouts. They have discovered signs of an enormous village, larger than anyone expected. Some officers recommend caution. Others believe speed remains essential. Custer considers his options carefully. He fears that waiting might allow the village to scatter. If that happens, the opportunity could disappear. His decision will soon shape the course of history. The sun continues climbing higher above the prairie. The Little Bighorn River flows quietly through the valley. The buffalo graze peacefully beyond the distant hills, and both armies, unaware of exactly what awaits them, move steadily toward one another beneath the endless sky of the Great Plains. The morning of June 25th, 1876, dawn arrived gently over the Little Bighorn Valley. A light mist drifted above the winding river. Cottonwood trees cast long shadows across the grass. Birdsong echoed softly through the cool morning air. At first glance, the valley appeared peaceful. Families prepared breakfast. Children played beside the teepees. Women tended cooking fires. Horses grazed quietly along the riverbanks. It looked like countless ordinary mornings that had come before, yet history was quietly approaching. Imagine standing upon a grassy hill overlooking the enormous village. Hundreds upon hundreds of buffalo hide teepees stretch along the Little Bighorn River. Smoke rises gently into the clear blue sky. Dogs wander through the camp. Young riders race horses across the open prairie. The village is alive with everyday life. Many people know that American soldiers are somewhere nearby, but no one knows exactly when they will arrive. Several miles away, Colonel George Armstrong Custer studies the reports brought by his scouts. The experienced Crow and Arikara scouts have climbed high ridges overlooking the valley. From there, they see something astonishing. The village is far larger than anyone expected. One scout later recalled that it seemed to cover the entire valley. Another warned that there were too many Indians. The reports concern several officers. Some recommend waiting for General Terry's larger force. Others suggest attacking immediately before the village has an opportunity to move. Custer faces an enormously difficult decision. If he waits, the village might scatter. Large Lakota and Cheyenne camps often moved quickly. Families could dismantle teepees, pack horses, and disappear across the plains within hours. If that happened, months of searching might begin all over again. Believing speed offered the best chance of success, Custer chose to attack. Modern historians continue discussing this decision. Some believe waiting for reinforcements might have changed everything. Others argue that Custer feared losing contact with the village entirely. Whatever the reasoning, the choice was made. The 7th Cavalry advanced. Imagine the cavalry preparing for battle. Soldiers tighten saddle straps. Carbines are checked one final time. Officers quietly give instructions. Dust rises beneath restless horses. The afternoon sun grows steadily warmer. Some men speak confidently. Others remain unusually quiet. Every soldier understands that the coming hours may determine his future. Custer divided his regiment into several separate battalions. Major Marcus Reno received one command, Captain Frederick Benteen another. Custer personally led the remaining companies. This division reflected common cavalry tactics of the period. Multiple columns could surround an opponent more effectively, provided communication remained possible. Yet the size of the village soon complicated every plan. As Reno's battalion approached the southern edge of the camp, the first alarm spread rapidly. Children stopped playing. Dogs barked loudly. Women quickly gathered younger family members. Warriors hurried toward their horses. Within moments, and the peaceful valley transformed. Imagine standing beside the river as hundreds of riders suddenly appear. Some mount horses almost instantly. Others race toward the sound of approaching gunfire. The quiet morning disappears beneath clouds of dust. The thunder of galloping horses fills the valley. Voices call urgently across the camp. Everything happens with astonishing speed. Reno's soldiers cross the Little Bighorn River and advance toward the village. Initially, many believed they were attacking only a portion of the camp. Instead, They found themselves facing far greater numbers than expected. Lakota and Cheyenne warriors quickly gathered. Rather than fleeing, they moved confidently to defend their families. The fighting intensified. Realizing the situation had become dangerous, Reno ordered his men to withdraw into nearby timber. Soon afterward, the retreat became increasingly disorganized. Several soldiers attempted to cross the river under heavy pressure. Many did not survive. The survivors eventually reached high bluffs overlooking the valley. There they regrouped. While Reno struggled in the south, events unfolded rapidly farther north. Custer continued advancing with approximately 200 men. Exactly what happened during the next hour remains one of the greatest mysteries in American history. No soldier serving directly with Custer survived the battle. Historians therefore rely upon archaeological evidence, Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho oral histories, together with observations made by other soldiers from distant positions. What seems clear is that Custer encountered far more resistance than anticipated. Imagine riding beside the northern ridges. The prairie stretches endlessly around you. Suddenly, warriors begin appearing from every direction, not dozens, but hundreds. They ride swiftly across the hills, using every fold of the landscape for protection. Dust fills the summer air. Gunfire echoes across the valley. The sound of horses blends with shouted commands. The battle spreads rapidly across several ridges. Among the warriors responding to the attack was Crazy Horse. Numerous Lakota oral traditions describe his remarkable leadership during these critical moments. Rather than attacking recklessly, he encouraged coordinated movements. Groups of mounted warriors surrounded isolated cavalry positions. Using their deep knowledge of the terrain, they gradually closed the distance. Gall rode courageously after learning that members of his own family had been killed during the fighting. Other respected leaders quickly joined the defense. Each acted to protect the village. The battle became fierce, yet it unfolded across broken hills rather than one single battlefield. Small groups fought separately. Riders moved constantly. Visibility changed with every ridge. Commands became increasingly difficult to hear. Imagine the smoke drifting slowly across the hilltops. The prairie grass bends beneath the summer wind. Horses race between scattered groups of fighters. Some soldiers seek higher ground. Others defend rocky positions. Warriors circle patiently, looking for opportunities. The struggle continues, minute after minute. Eventually, resistance upon the northern ridges came to an end. Colonel Custer, his brothers, his nephew, and every soldier remaining with his immediate command lost their lives. The battle had lasted only a few hours, yet it would become one of the most famous military engagements in American history. Meanwhile, Reno and Benteen continued defending their positions upon the bluffs. The warriors did not launch endless attacks against them. Instead, many gradually returned to the village. Their families still required protection. The battle had never been fought simply to achieve military glory. Its purpose had always been to defend the people gathered along the Little Bighorn. 2 days later, General Terry's approaching column finally reached the battlefield. The silence that greeted the soldiers was profound. The fighting had ended. The Lakota and Cheyenne village had already moved on. The prairie once again appeared peaceful. Only scattered equipment, fallen horses, and the solemn task of burying the dead remained. News of the battle spread across the United States with astonishing speed. Newspapers called it Custer's Last Stand. Many Americans reacted with shock. How could one of the nation's most famous cavalry officers lose an entire battalion? For the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho, the battle represented something quite different. It became a powerful defense of their homeland and their families. Yet even amid celebration, many leaders understood an important truth. This victory would not end the conflict. It might instead bring an even greater military response. The United States possessed vast resources. More soldiers would come. More forts would be built. More pressure would follow. The victory beside the Little Bighorn, though remarkable, marked not the end of the Great Sioux War, but the beginning of its most difficult chapter. The winds that swept across the quiet valley carried both triumph and the shadow of what was still to come. The victory at the Little Bighorn echoed across the American frontier like thunder rolling across the open plains. For the Lakota, the Northern Cheyenne, and their Arapaho allies, it had been a remarkable defense of their families and homeland. For the United States, it was a stunning military defeat. Newspapers from New York to San Francisco printed dramatic headlines. Stories about the destruction of Custer's command captured the nation's attention. Many Americans could scarcely believe the news. General George Armstrong Custer, one of the country's most celebrated cavalry officers, had fallen in battle. Imagine a quiet newspaper office in the summer of 1876. Printers rush to prepare the next edition. Editors read telegrams arriving from the western frontier. The room falls silent as the details become clear. Custer and his command have been lost. Within hours, the presses begin turning. Bundles of newspapers are loaded onto trains. The story spreads across the nation. For many readers, the Battle of the Little Bighorn became a symbol of tragedy. For others, it became a call for action. Public opinion quickly shifted. If there had once been debate about military operations on the northern plains, there was far less now. Many citizens demanded a stronger response. The United States government answered with determination. Additional soldiers were ordered west. Fresh supplies followed. Military campaigns that had once paused during harsh weather would now continue with greater urgency. The war was far from over. Imagine the endless prairie during the late summer of 1876. The grass still ripples beneath the warm wind. Buffalo graze in the distance, yet scattered across the landscape. New columns of blue-coated cavalry steadily advance. More wagons, more scouts, more horses. The quiet spaces between forts begin to shrink. For the Lakota and their allies, victory had brought both pride and uncertainty. The great village along the Little Bighorn could not remain together forever. Such a large gathering required enormous amounts of food. Buffalo herds continued moving across the plains. Families gradually separated into smaller camps once again. Some traveled north. Others headed west toward the Bighorn Mountains. Several remained near familiar hunting grounds. Life resumed its seasonal rhythm. Yet everyone understood that larger American armies were now searching for them. Imagine an autumn evening inside one of these smaller camps. Children sit quietly beside the fire, while elders tell stories. Women prepare buffalo meat for the coming winter. Nearby, warriors inspect their horses. The atmosphere feels peaceful, but scouts continue arriving with reports. More soldiers have crossed the Yellowstone River. Another fort has received reinforcements. The army is still coming. Among the military leaders directing the campaign was General Nelson A. Miles. Unlike some earlier commanders, Miles believed in constant movement. Rather than waiting until spring, he continued operations throughout the winter whenever possible. Winter campaigning proved difficult for everyone. Snow covered the prairie. Bitter winds swept across the open plains. Food became harder to obtain. Horses grew weaker. Yet Miles believed these hardships affected the Sioux even more than the army. Imagine cavalry soldiers marching through deep snow. Their horses breathe clouds of white mist into the freezing air. Boots crunch across frozen ground. Every river crossing becomes a challenge. campfires provide only limited warmth beneath the endless winter sky. The soldiers endure difficult conditions, but so do the Sioux. Buffalo herds become more difficult to locate. Travel slows. Children and elders require constant care. The long winter tests every family. Crazy Horse continued leading many of the Oglala Lakota who remained free upon the plains. His reputation had only grown after the Little Bighorn. Warriors respected his courage. Families trusted his leadership. Yet even Crazy Horse recognized the changing reality. The United States possessed far greater numbers. Its resources seemed almost endless. Every battle won by the Lakota brought another military expedition. Every victory encouraged additional soldiers to arrive. Imagine Crazy Horse riding across a snow-covered ridge during the winter of 1876. The prairie stretches silently beneath gray skies. Only a handful of buffalo remain nearby. His horse moves steadily through the deep snow. He pauses at the crest of a hill, looking toward the distant horizon. Somewhere beyond those rolling plains, more soldiers continue advancing. The struggle is becoming increasingly difficult. Meanwhile, Red Cloud had already chosen a different path. After the Treaty of Fort Laramie, he settled near the Red Cloud Agency. Although he remained deeply respected among the Lakota, he believed continued warfare would bring even greater suffering. His influence now focused upon protecting his people through diplomacy whenever possible. Not every Lakota leader agreed. Some believed resistance remained essential. Others accepted that circumstances had changed. History rarely presents easy choices. Every decision carried painful consequences. As the winter slowly passed, conditions became increasingly severe. The buffalo, so central to Sioux life, were growing less abundant. Commercial hunters had begun killing enormous numbers across the plains. Some hunted for hides, others for railroad supplies. Many carcasses were simply left where they fell. Imagine riding across the prairie and seeing scattered buffalo bones bleaching beneath the sun. Only a generation earlier, the herds had stretched beyond the horizon. Now, entire valleys stand strangely empty. For the Lakota, this loss reaches far beyond food alone. The buffalo had provided clothing, shelter, tools, ceremonial objects. Nearly every part of daily life depended upon them. Without the buffalo, the old way of life became increasingly difficult to sustain. During the spring of 1877, many Lakota bands faced an agonizing choice: continue resisting or surrender at the agencies where food and supplies could be obtained. One by one, several respected leaders made their decisions. Some crossed into Canada with Sitting Bull, others rode toward American forts. Families hoped simply to survive. Crazy Horse continued holding out for several more months, but conditions steadily worsened. His people grew exhausted, children became hungry, the horses weakened. Finally, in May of 1877, Crazy Horse led nearly 1,000 followers to Fort Robinson in Nebraska. The decision was not made lightly. It reflected concern for the well-being of the families traveling with him. Imagine that quiet procession approaching the fort. Warriors ride silently. Women guide heavily loaded horses. Children look curiously toward the wooden buildings ahead. No victory songs accompany the journey, only quiet determination. The soldiers watch respectfully as the long line enters the post. For many, it marks the end of years spent living freely upon the northern plains. Although the fighting had largely ended, peace remained uncertain. Misunderstandings soon developed between military officials and Crazy Horse. Rumors spread through the camp. Some claimed he planned to escape. Others insisted he intended no such thing. Historians continue debating exactly what happened. The historical record remains incomplete. What is certain is that tension steadily increased. On September 5th, 1877, military authorities attempted to place Crazy Horse under arrest. As confusion spread, a struggle broke out near the guardhouse at Fort Robinson. During the confrontation, Crazy Horse was mortally wounded by a soldier's bayonet. He died later that evening. He was only about 37 years old. His family quietly carried his body away. According to Lakota tradition, the location of his final resting place has never been publicly revealed. Perhaps that is fitting. For a man who sought neither fame nor recognition during his lifetime, with the passing of Crazy Horse, one of the greatest chapters of Sioux resistance came to an end. Yet the story of the Sioux Nation was not over. Far to the north, Sitting Bull remained beyond the reach of the United States. Across the Canadian border, he and many followers continued searching for a future where their people might still live freely. The winds of the Great Plains had grown quieter, but history still had one final heartbreaking chapter waiting beyond the horizon. The death of Crazy Horse in September of 1877 marked the end of one chapter, but it did not bring an end to the story of the Sioux. Far to the north, beyond the international border, another great leader still remained free, Sitting Bull, together with several thousand Lakota followers. He had crossed into Canada after the Great Sioux War. The journey was long. The prairie stretched endlessly beneath their horses. Families traveled together through changing seasons. Children rode beside their parents. Elders watched the familiar grasslands slowly give way to new horizons. For Sitting Bull, the decision had not been easy. He loved the land south of the border, the valleys, the rivers, the sacred Black Hills. But remaining there meant constant pursuit by the United States Army. Canada offered something different, distance. For a while, at least it offered peace. Imagine arriving at the rolling plains of what is now Saskatchewan during the autumn of 1877. Golden grass sways beneath a cool northern wind. The sky feels even wider than before. Buffalo still roam in scattered herds. Small lakes reflect clouds drifting overhead. The Lakota establish new camps. Teepees rise once again beneath the open sky. Children quickly adapt to their unfamiliar surroundings. Life continues, as it always has. The Canadian government, represented on the plains by the newly formed Northwest Mounted Police, approached the newcomers differently than many American officials had. Rather than immediately demanding surrender, the mounted police sought peaceful communication. Their famous red uniforms became a familiar sight across the northern plains. Imagine one of those quiet meetings. A handful of mounted police officers ride slowly toward a Lakota camp. Their horses move calmly. Weapons remain holstered. Sitting Bull steps forward to greet them. Interpreters carefully translate each sentence. Both sides understand that neither wishes unnecessary conflict. Respect guides the conversation. The Canadians explain that the Lakota may remain peacefully, but they cannot launch raids into the United States from Canadian soil. Sitting Bull agrees. For several years, an uneasy peace settles over the northern plains. Yet peace alone cannot solve every problem. The buffalo, once numbering in the millions, are disappearing. Commercial hunting has reached astonishing levels. Professional hide hunters travel west by railroad. Powerful rifles replace bows. Trains carry thousands of buffalo hides eastward every month. Imagine standing upon a hill overlooking the prairie around 1880. The wind still moves through the grass. The rivers still sparkle beneath the sun. But something feels different. The enormous buffalo herds are gone. Only scattered groups remain. The earth no longer trembles beneath countless hooves. The familiar sounds of the great migrations have faded into silence. For the Lakota, this loss is almost impossible to measure. The buffalo had been more than food. They were clothing, shelter, tools, ceremony, memory. Without them, the traditional way of life becomes increasingly difficult. Winter after winter, food grows scarcer. Families endure hunger. Children become weaker. Even the strongest leaders begin facing impossible decisions. Sitting Bull understands the reality before him. His people cannot survive indefinitely without reliable food. The Canadian government offers little assistance. The buffalo continue disappearing, one by one. Many Lakota families reluctantly return south to the United States. Finally, in July of 1881, after 4 difficult years in Canada, Sitting Bull also crosses the border. Imagine the quiet journey. There is no celebration, no victory procession, only tired families riding beneath the summer sun. They approach Fort Buford in present-day North Dakota. American soldiers wait quietly. Sitting Bull dismounts from his horse. According to historical accounts, he handed his rifle to the commanding officer, a symbolic gesture, not of defeat alone, but of responsibility for the lives of those who had followed him. The great years of free movement across the northern plains had come to an end. Sitting Bull and his followers were eventually sent to the Standing Rock Reservation. Life there differed profoundly from everything they had known. The buffalo hunts disappeared. Government-issued food replaced traditional hunting. Children increasingly attended boarding schools established by federal authorities. Farming was encouraged. Movement beyond reservation boundaries became restricted. Imagine a reservation during the mid-1880s. Small wooden houses stand where teepees once covered the prairie. Fields replace buffalo ranges. The open freedom of the Great Plains feels distant. Elders continue telling stories. Parents continue teaching their language whenever possible. Yet everyone senses that their world has changed forever. Still, Lakota culture does not disappear. Families continue gathering for ceremonies. Songs remain, stories survive. Children learn from grandparents. Hope quietly endures. Then, during the late 1880s, news of a remarkable spiritual movement began spreading across many indigenous communities. It became known as the Ghost Dance. The movement began with a Northern Paiute spiritual leader named Wovoka. He taught that if people lived peacefully, prayed sincerely, and participated in sacred dances, a new age of harmony would eventually arrive. Different nations understood these teachings in different ways. Among many Lakota, and the Ghost Dance offered hope during years of hardship. Imagine an open prairie beneath the autumn sky. Men, women, children, and elders gather together in a wide circle. They hold hands. Soft songs rise into the evening air. Feet move gently in rhythm. The dance continues for hours, not as preparation for war, but as an expression of faith, of healing, of longing for a better future. Many American officials misunderstood the movement. Some feared it signaled another uprising. Reports filled with misunderstanding traveled between reservation agents and military commanders. Concern gradually replaced patience. In December of 1890, tension reached a tragic turning point. On December 15th, Indian Agency police attempted to arrest Sitting Bull. Officials feared his influence over the growing Ghost Dance movement. The circumstances remain complex. Historical accounts differ on several details. What is clear is that confusion quickly erupted. A struggle broke out. Gunfire followed. When the violence ended, Sitting Bull had been killed. He was around 59 years old. News spread rapidly across the reservations. Many Lakota families fled, hoping simply to avoid further violence. One group, led by Chief Spotted Elk, whom many Americans knew as Bigfoot, headed toward the Pine Ridge Reservation seeking safety. The winter wind swept across the frozen prairie. Snow covered the hills. The people traveled slowly. Many were already sick with pneumonia. Children rode quietly beneath heavy blankets. No one sought battle. They wanted only peace. Yet United States cavalry units intercepted the group near a small creek called Wounded Knee. There, history prepared to write one of its saddest chapters, the story of Wounded Knee and its lasting legacy. Will bring our journey through the history of the Sioux Nation to its final reflection. The morning of December 29th, 1890, dawn arrived quietly over the snow-covered plains of South Dakota. A bitter winter wind swept across the frozen grass. The sky remained pale beneath heavy clouds. Near the small creek known as Wounded Knee, hundreds of Lakota families waited anxiously. Many had traveled for days through deep snow. Some were exhausted, others were ill. Children stayed close to their parents beneath thick blankets. Elders sat quietly beside small campfires that struggled against the cold. Their leader, Chief Spotted Elk, known to many Americans as Bigfoot, was gravely sick with pneumonia. Wrapped in blankets, he could barely stand. His greatest hope was simple: to reach the Pine Ridge Reservation peacefully. Instead, the group had been intercepted by soldiers of the United States 7th Cavalry, the same regiment that 14 years earlier had suffered defeat at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Imagine the camp that cold morning. Rows of military tents stand across the snow nearby. Lakota teepees rise quietly against the frozen landscape. Soldiers move carefully between cannon positions. Lakota families wait uncertainly. No one truly knows what the day will bring. Military officers order the Lakota to surrender their weapons. Many comply. Rifles are collected and stacked together, yet confusion remains. Some soldiers believe additional weapons have been hidden. Searches continue. The atmosphere grows increasingly tense. Then, a single gunshot echoes across the frozen valley. Historians still debate exactly how that first shot was fired. The historical record remains uncertain. Some accounts suggest it came from a struggle as soldiers attempted to disarm a deaf Lakota man named Black Coyote. Others describe the confusion differently. What followed, however, is tragically clear. Gunfire erupted across the camp. Soldiers fired rifles. Artillery positioned on nearby hills opened fire. Families scattered in every direction. Parents desperately searched for children. Children searched for parents. Horses bolted through the snow. The quiet winter morning dissolved into chaos. Imagine the snow-covered valley only minutes later. Smoke drifts slowly through the cold air. The thunder of gunfire echoes against distant hills. Blankets lie scattered across the snow. Broken wagons stand abandoned. Then, gradually, silence returns. When the firing finally stopped, more than 200 Lakota men, women, and children had lost their lives. 25 American soldiers also died, many likely struck by friendly fire during the confusion. The tragedy shocked many people across the United States. Some newspapers described it as a battle. Others questioned whether it had been a massacre. Today, many historians and Lakota descendants remember Wounded Knee as one of the darkest and most heartbreaking events in the history of the American frontier. It marked more than the loss of life. It symbolized the closing of an era. The age of the free buffalo hunts had ended. The great villages that once stretched for miles across the plains had disappeared. The long years of resistance led by Red Cloud, Crazy Horse, and Sitting Bull had passed into history. Yet, the Sioux Nation itself did not disappear. Imagine visiting a Lakota family during the first years of the 20th century. A grandmother quietly teaches her grandchildren traditional songs. A grandfather tells stories about the buffalo that once covered the plains beyond the horizon. Children repeat Dakota and Lakota words they are learning from their parents. Although life has changed, memory survives, culture survives, hope survives. Throughout the 20th century, the Sioux people faced many new challenges. Government boarding schools attempted to replace indigenous languages with English. Traditional ceremonies were sometimes discouraged or even prohibited. Economic hardship affected many reservation communities. Yet despite these difficulties, families continued protecting their heritage. Stories remained alive. Songs continued to be sung. Sacred places remained deeply respected. Languages endured because elders refused to let them be forgotten. Gradually, change began arriving once again. During the 20th century, many federal policies toward Native American communities slowly evolved. The Indian Citizenship Act of 1924 recognized Native Americans born in the United States as U.S. citizens. Later decades saw increasing efforts to protect tribal sovereignty, cultural traditions, and religious freedom. Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota leaders worked tirelessly to preserve their history for future generations. Today, across South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, Nebraska, Montana, and parts of Canada, Sioux communities continue honoring the traditions passed down through countless generations. Children still learn their ancestral languages. Artists create remarkable beadwork and quill work. Powwows bring together families from many nations. Traditional songs continue echoing across the plains. Elders continue telling the same stories once shared beside ancient campfires centuries ago. Imagine attending a modern powwow on a warm summer evening. The drum begins beating slowly. Its rhythm echoes across the gathering grounds. Colorful regalia shimmer beneath the golden light of sunset. Children dance beside grandparents. Visitors from many backgrounds gather respectfully to celebrate indigenous culture. The past and present meet in one beautiful moment. The Sioux Nation has endured. Its history did not end at Wounded Knee. It continued. It continues still. Looking back over our journey together, we have traveled across nearly 1,000 years. We watched families move westward from the forests into the vast Great Plains. We witnessed the arrival of the horse and the transformation of life upon the prairie. We followed buffalo hunts beneath endless skies. We met remarkable leaders, Red Cloud, Crazy Horse, Sitting Bull. We explored diplomacy as well as conflict, victory as well as loss, hope as well as sorrow. Yet perhaps the greatest lesson of Sioux history is not found upon any battlefield. It is found in resilience. Cultures can endure even through extraordinary hardship. Languages can survive because parents choose to teach their children. Traditions continue because communities refuse to forget. History is not simply the story of wars. It is the story of people, of families, of songs carried across generations, of memories preserved through love and determination. As our journey now comes gently to its end, imagine once more standing upon the Great Plains. The sun is slowly setting beyond the western horizon. Golden light washes across endless fields of prairie grass. A gentle breeze carries the scent of sage. Somewhere in the distance, a lone eagle circles high above. The rivers continue flowing. The black hills still rise proudly against the evening sky. The stars begin appearing, one by one, just as they did centuries ago when Lakota children listened to their grandparents beside glowing campfires. Empires have risen, borders have changed, Railroads have crossed the continent, cities have grown, yet the land remains quiet, patient, enduring. Thank you for joining me tonight on this peaceful journey through the complete history of the Sioux Nation. If you found this story relaxing and meaningful, I hope you'll return for another evening with Whispered History, where together we'll continue exploring the remarkable civilizations, forgotten kingdoms, legendary leaders, and timeless stories that shaped our world. Until next time, may your evening be peaceful, may your dreams be gentle, and may the whispers of history guide you into a deep and restful sleep. Good night,